As the 90s ushered in a new era of rock music dubbed alternative rock or by some grunge, one of the bands that was part of this new movement were the Smashing Pumpkins. The Chicago band would first appear on the scene in 1991 with their debut record Gish. 2 years later, they would become full-fledged superstars with the release of their sophomore effort, Siamese Dream, and their follow-up 2-disc release in 1995, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. But fame would come at a cost with tragedy, infighting, and out-of-control egos. Drummer Jimmy Chamberlin, who would be vital to the band's sound, would leave the group several times throughout his career, and none was more tragic than the mid-90s. Today, let's explore the career of drummer Jimmy Chamberlin in the Smashing Pumpkins. Born to a large family of 6 kids, Chamberlin would grow up in Joliet, Illinois, about 35 miles south of Chicago. The drummer would be surrounded by a musical family with both his older brother Paul and his father playing drums and clarinet and being part of jazz bands. Chamberlin admitted to Modern Drummer at a young age, and I quote, "I did have the rock ethic though. I definitely wanted the chicks and the fast cars, but not necessarily the long hair and the 20-piece drum kit." By the time he turned 9, Chamberlin picked up the drums and followed it up with 5 years of lessons from drummer Charlie Adams, who would go on to play for Yanni. In addition to that, Chamberlin learned from his older brother and practiced up to 4 hours a day and took further lessons in high school from other instructors. Chamberlin was such a gifted drummer that he didn't play in any high school bands, instead playing paid gigs with musicians 10 years older than him. Recalling to Modern Drummer magazine, "I didn't really ever play in high school bands. I played with this garage group called the Warrior Band, which played Pat Travers type music, and they were all about 25 and pretty good musicians. There I was, 15 years old, playing Friday and Saturday nights, getting sloshed and having to go back to school on Monday. At 16, I had a girlfriend who was 23, but I was making $400 a week doing these gigs, and I was totally convinced at that point that music was something I was going to do for the rest of my life." Despite sharing similar interests with his father, Chamberlin would have a strained relationship with his dad, leaving home at the age of 15, and by the mid-90s, he hadn't even said a word to his father, despite his newfound fame. He would tell Rolling Stone in 1994 how despite his middle-class upbringing, he had a bad childhood, recalling, "It was highly dysfunctional. My father was really abusive. I decided early on that I didn't want to be like him." After graduating from Northern Illinois University, Chamberlin would head to Chicago and would split his time working as a carpenter while also playing in jazz bands. He would end up being a late addition to the Smashing Pumpkins, who were originally a trio with frontman Billy Corgan, guitarist James Iha, and bassist Darcy Retzky using a drum machine during their early live gigs. Chamberlin would recall to Drummer magazine in 1994 his first impression of the band, saying, "So I went out and saw the band, Billy, James, and Darcy, playing at the Avalon with a drum machine. Man, did they sound horrible. They were atrocious. But the thing I noticed was that not only were the song structures good, but Billy's voice had a lot of drive to it, like he was dying to succeed. So I ended up driving from work every Wednesday to rehearse with him." Corgan would admit that he didn't initially think Chamberlin was a good fit for the band, pointing to his fashion, which included a mullet, a pink t-shirt, stonewashed jeans, in addition to his yellow drum kit. It would be Chamberlin's persistence and the fact that he learned all the band's songs pretty quickly that resulted in Corgan changing his mind. Chamberlin also bonded with his bandmates over their similar but difficult upbringings, with him telling Rolling Stone, "I relate to him man to man, and that's it." Chamberlin would say of Corgan, adding, "I'm not the type of guy to say, 'Oh, you've had such a rough life,' because nobody says that to me, and my life has been plenty rough." With Chamberlin now in the lineup, the band would record their debut record Gish in 1991. Despite being praised by critics, the album came out 5 months before Nirvana's Nevermind, and Gish would only peak at number 195 on the Billboard 200 charts. It would eventually be certified platinum, but by 1993 the Smashing Pumpkins were now superstars thanks to their follow-up release Siamese Dream. With that fame came a lot of personal problems, with Chamberlin telling Modern Drummer magazine, "We felt enormous pressure to make a great record, and it definitely got to us, and to me personally." Iha and Retzky were both a couple during the tour for Gish, and they would also break up during that time. Also adding to the band's problems were frontman Billy Corgan's mental health issues that led him to having a breakdown in 1992 and going into therapy. Couple this with Chamberlin's substance abuse issues, and the band was a powder keg ready to explode. Corgan's time in therapy resulted in him talking more openly about the band's issues, creating tensions amongst its members. By Corgan's own admission, the band nearly imploded during the making of Siamese Dream. They would opt to record their second album in Georgia to help keep costs down, but that wasn't the only reason. They also chose Georgia to keep Chamberlain out of trouble, but the move wouldn't work. Sometimes Jimmy would be too inebriated to play, and once disappeared for a week. Corgan would give the drummer an ultimatum: either shape up or you're fired, and it seemed to work, at least for the time being. Chamberlain would attend rehab, with a sponsor at the time being Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist Dave Navarro. The drummer would tell Rolling Stone that he went to his bandmates during the recording and said, "I'm sure it's obvious to you at this point that I have a problem. They were afraid to come to me and tell me my life was a mess, and now for me, I've done an amazing job of staying clean. I gotten high in every city in this country and probably half the cities in Europe." That sobriety, though, would be short-lived, as Rolling Stone would write in their 1994 profile on the band when they hit the road, saying, "Still, some days are better than others." Backstage in Chicago, as the band waited to soundcheck, reports began floating in that Chamberlain, who was spotted the night before in a bar, had fallen off the wagon. A search party was sent out. Darcy stared at her feet and said, "This used to be funny, it's just not anymore." When the band returned in 1995 for their third record, the ambitious double disc Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, things got even worse. Chamberlain would tell Spin magazine ahead of the band hitting the road, "This tour will tell us a lot about whatever future the band has." Famous last words. Joining the band on the tour was keyboardist Jonathan Melvoin, whose past credits included the punk band The Dickies and musician Prince. Ironically, Melvoin's father was a strong anti-drug advocate in the music industry, and he would be recommended to Corgan by Ministry vocalist Chris Connolly. There would be two incidents that foreshadowed what was to come in the summer of 1996. During a tour stop in Bangkok, Thailand, a hotbed for drugs, Chamberlain fell off the wagon. Corgan would reveal to MTV that the band knew Chamberlain had returned to his old ways, but believed his partying was in check, as it seemed to only happen on the weekends. As the band headed to Australia, Chamberlain would learn that his father had passed away, and the news only seemed to push the drummer further down the rabbit hole, and the band's Australia dates were quickly postponed. In the meantime, the band headed back home to Chicago, and it was during this time Melvoin witnessed the birth of his son. Then in May, the band was in Europe on tour. During a stop in Spain, both Melvoin and Chamberlain overdosed, ending up in the hospital. Both musicians would survive, but they wouldn't be so lucky a few months later. Melvoin was temporarily fired after what happened in Spain, but due to Corgan liking the keyboardist and not having a replacement for the rest of the tour, he gave him another chance. Chamberlain, meanwhile, soon saw sober coaches and handlers joining the band on the road in Europe to keep him and Melvoin out of trouble, but it proved to be futile. Despite keeping Chamberlain and Melvoin's problems under wraps from the press, it would come out into the open in July of '96. The band was in New York City to perform in Madison Square Garden, and on July 12th, both Melvoin and Chamberlain were staying at a different hotel than the rest of the band, and MTV would report that the pair returned to Melvoin's room at 11 p.m. at night, and Melvoin would die at the age of 34 the following morning due to a deadly combination of drugs and alcohol. The members of the band would appear at the 19th Precinct Police Station to answer questions by the cops. None of the surviving members would appear at the keyboardist's funeral. The group's tour would be put on pause until August, as Chamberlain would be fired from the band, and Corgan would now have to look for a replacement drummer and keyboardist. The frontman defended the band's decision to fire Chamberlain, saying, "We fired the guy to save his life. We cannot continue thinking, maybe he'll get better. We were criticized for being intolerant and not helping Jimmy when he needed us most. Believe me, the guy couldn't have had any more chances. He used up all his chances plus 5. For everyone's safety and mental health stability, we had to part company." The Tampa Bay Tribune would report that the drummer pled guilty to the reduced charge before a criminal court judge as part of a deal that would see him undergo drug treatment. If Chamberlain was successful at the time, his court records would be sealed, but if he failed, he would serve 15 days in jail, the paper would report. Then 3 years later, in 1999, Chamberlain returned to the Smashing Pumpkins, a feat Corgan once said would take, and I quote, "a lot of tea in China to happen." It was strange because there was no formal announcement by the Pumpkins camp, and they instead chose to let word trickle out that he was back in the band, according to MTV News. Even before his first show back with the group, no one from the Pumpkins camp would even talk about his return. 1999 saw the Pumpkins on tour promoting their fourth album, Adore, which Chamberlain never played on, and the Pumpkins were out on the road with Queens of the Stone Age. MTV would interview Queens of the Stone Age frontman Josh Homme, who first leaked the news that Chamberlain was rejoining the band. The Smashing Pumpkins would continue on until 2000 before calling it quits, but in 2006 the band would return with Chamberlain and Corgan being the only classic members returning, and the band put out 2007's album Zeitgeist. By 2009, Chamberlain quit the band once again, putting out a statement that read, "By now you've heard the news of my departure from the Smashing Pumpkins. I will say without going into any unnecessary details that this represents a positive move forward for me." Chamberlain would add, "I can no longer commit all of my energy into something that I don't fully possess. I won't pretend I'm into something I'm not. I won't do it for myself, you the fans, or my former partner. I can't just cash the check, so to speak." It was speculated that perhaps Chamberlain was tired of the band supposedly selling out, with their music appearing in Visa and Hyundai commercials as well as Guitar Hero. In addition to that, frontman Billy Corgan at the time appeared in Washington to testify in favor of the Live Nation merger with Ticketmaster. 6 years later, though, the drummer once again returned to the Smashing Pumpkins, putting out a statement that read, "Billy Corgan found himself in the position of just not having a drummer for the tour, and he wanted to play the set that we're going to play, so he just reached out on email and said before he goes looking for someone to play those songs, which is obviously a long task, was there any way I could go out on this tour?" It's very exciting to go back and celebrate the music in a great context. It is embracing the friendship, the relationship, and the music, and proving that the music and the relationships are much bigger than all the politics from down the years. I thought about it for a second and said yes, he'd say. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.